called the Digital Library of India that the government had. They had been scanning books for 10 years, and it was 550,000 books. And I looked at it, and the scans aren't very good. They're not high resolution, and there's some pages, the metadata is not very good. But, you know, these are 30,000 books in Sanskrit, and 20,000 books in Telugu, and 12,000 books in Canara. It's books in 50 languages. And so I wrote a little script to see if I could download any of them, and I got home 17 hours later, and I checked my script, and yeah, I had downloaded 2 books. And so I spent about 9 months, and I was able to get 450,000 of those books out, and I put them up on the Internet Archive. Now, I noticed they were a little sloppy on their copyright. Some of the books were a little more modern than you would have expected, and they had publishers like Oxford University Press. And so the minute I put them on the Internet Archive, we immediately got a few takedown notices, and we dealt with those. University of North Carolina Press sent us a very nice notice. They said, you have 5 of our books online, and you know, normally we wouldn't care, but we're trying to monetize our back file. And so I looked, and I saw not only did we have the 5 books they had seen, there were 20 others that had been scanned, and we sent them a note back. We said, look, we found 25, and we removed them from public view, which is what you do in a very large library that's online. Now, the government had a very bad web server. It took me forever to get those books out. And what had happened is they were not visible on Google because the server was so bad. And we put them up there, and you know, we started getting the takedown notices and dealing with them. A crazy Russian noticed that there was a book that his father had written in 1960, and he knew some of the people involved in this government service. And he called them up and he went bananas. You know, he was threatening to sue, and you know, this is a travesty, oh my God, I want damages. And you know, so we heard about it when we removed his book, no big deal. The government took the entire server down. They didn't remove all the books from 1900 on, right? Because anything before 1900, you know is out of copyright, and that would have been 200,000 books. They took the entire server down. It's been down for a year and a half. So what I did, I got several notes saying you must delete every single book from the Internet Archive. And I'm like, we are not deleting 450,000 books. I pulled them up on a spreadsheet. And I sorted by date, I sorted by creator, and so Government of India is a creator, fine. Oxford University Press, 1980, not fine. And I knocked about 50,000 books out as being under copyright. And then I had the books back online. We've had it online for over a year. We've had 30 million views. I haven't had any takedown notices in 6 months. We may have some books that are still under copyright, you know, from 1950 or something like that. And if somebody sends it a takedown, we'll remove it from public view. But meanwhile, we are getting love letters from Sanskrit scholars saying, thank God you saved this thing because we depend on it for our research. We have volunteers who looked at what the government did with Telugu books. What they did is they did the titles and creators in Roman script. And there's actually a standard for how you go from Telugu to Roman. And they didn't follow it, they just typed in. And so we've had volunteers go through 15,000 of those books and retype the title and creator in Telugu. So you can now search and find your books. We have other volunteers doing the same thing in Canada. We are now localizing that software so that the books in Gujarati and Bangla and any Tamil, all of those, we're going to try to make that library better. Now, I think in the long run, this is just a stopgap because I think there needs to be a real public library of India. We changed the name of ours, by the way, because the government objected that people might think we were somehow working with them. I said, fine, we'll call it the Public Library of India. But I think we need to be scanning 1 or 2 million books every year at high resolution with good metadata and really, really high quality, you know, so the photographs are in color and you can use them in your work. And, you know, some of those books in your libraries may be in copyright, but again, anyone who's blind ought to be able to access it. If it's used in the course of instruction, you ought to be able to use it today. And eventually, all these books are going to be out of copyright. And so we should start scanning them today before they go bad. Right? Before they rot. Before they disappear. And if we don't do the scanning here in India for a public library in India, it's not going to happen, right? They're not going to do it in Europe, they're not going to do it in the United States. And there is this amazing, rich heritage of books in Indian languages that should be available. So that's collection number 3. I'm going to talk about a fourth that's a little more theoretical. There is a system in Russia called Sci-Hub, Scientific Hub. There's a young lady from Kazakhstan that was doing graduate work, a lady named Alexandra Elkibin. And she couldn't access the scientific journal she needed to do her work for her PhD, for her graduate studies. And so she created Sci-Hub. It's a pirate site. They have every journal article ever written. Not every one, but there's 71.3 million PDF files, over 7 crore files on this system. India is the second largest user of Sci-Hub in the world because many Indian universities do not have access to journals because they are so expensive. GNU spends more money on journals than it does on supporting their entire graduate student body, right? All their PhD and master's students. China is the biggest user of Sci-Hub, but the US and the United Kingdom are in the top 10 as well because American students don't have access to journals. Journals are so expensive that even Harvard is dialing back on their purchase of journals. Now, you may say, well, okay, fine, but these are copyrighted works and the people that publish them deserve to get a fair return on their investment. And I would agree with that. But here's something to understand about Sci-Hub and the journals of the world. I did a study of works of the United States government. So under U.S. law, if a federal employee in the course of their official duties authors something, a doctor at the National Institutes of Health, an engineer with the Army Corps of Engineers, that work is not subject to copyright. You may not copyright that work. It's a unique aspect of American law. And I saw that President Obama had done a law review article with the Harvard Law Review, and Harvard was asserting copyright over that. And I thought to myself, I wonder how many of those there are. I found 1.2 million articles by federal employees in the scholarly corpus of journal articles. Now, was it in the course of their official duties? That's a little harder to tell. And so we pulled 10,000 of them out for manual examination. Almost all of them have a copyright assertion. Many of them are very clearly in the course of official duties. My point is, there's a lot of journal articles in these paywall systems that are run by commercial companies like Oxford Press and Cambridge Press and Reed Elsevier and Francis and Taylor. Ironic that these are all British corporations. I'm going to get to that in just a second. Many of them are not subject to copyright. There are a whole bunch. So in the U.S., before 1963, you had to renew copyright every so many years. A guy at the University of Pennsylvania went through and he noticed that most of the journals failed to renew their copyright. So again, those articles are not subject to copyright. And so the point is, there's a lot of articles that are only available at really high prices that are not subject to copyright that should be available for anybody to use. And more importantly, there are applications. So with Sci-Hub, you can actually do big data on all journals ever written. And with big data, you can do text mining, and you can do life-saving research. There's things called meta-research, and what you do is you go through and you find all articles that talk about the P53 cancer gene, for example. And you pull all those articles and you summarize them, and you come up with new research results, right, based on the existing stuff that's out there. There's a whole bunch of these kinds of big data applications that could be done and may not be today because the publishers have wrapped this stuff up. I think that's a huge issue. I think Indian students have a right to education under the Constitution. They shouldn't have to sneak around and go to a place like Sci-Hub when under Indian law, we could make that material available to them in the course of their instruction. I think the blind under the Marrakesh Treaty have a right to hear every one of those journal articles, and we should make that available. A lot of what I'm doing as I go around India giving talks and meeting people is I'm talking to lawyers and vice chancellors and deans of schools, and we're trying to understand, is there any way that we can either use Sci-Hub or use something else equivalent to it to make this information available. Now, I believe very strongly that universal access is the great promise of our generation. Every generation gets an opportunity. We have an internet now. It needs to be everywhere. It isn't yet. But I believe access to information is the great thing that we can do. And the question is, how do you change the world to make that happen? And what I do is I look to people that have come before us. So in India, I look to people like Gandhi and Tilak and Nehru and Gokhale and Bose, Justice Rana Day, but especially Gandhi. And there's so much to learn from him on how you confront a government and a system of law and change it. One of the big lessons from Gandhiji was bread labor. You know, he believes that every day you should do physical labor. Now, you may think that's a spinning wheel, but you know, when Gandhiji was in South Africa and they opened the Phoenix Ashram, the very first thing they do is they took a big printing press from Durban and they put it on ox carts and they hauled it into the wilderness. And before they made houses for themselves, they built a house for the printing press. And then they built residences for themselves. And every day, everybody had to do typesetting and printing. That was bread labor for Gandhi in the early days. And I believe in today's world, if you're working on open source software, that's bread labor. Right? It's typing. It's not physical in the sense of spinning, but it's physical typing. I believe that is the kind of thing that we need to do. We all need to do that kind of work every day. And maybe you're not working on open source. Maybe you adopt your local clinic and you help them fix their computers, or you volunteer to put on bandages. But you should do some of that kind of work every day is one of the lessons that I have learned. That if you don't do it every day, if you just come in on a hackathon once a month, you're never going to get anything done. It's got to be a daily thing. The second lesson I've learned is about petitioning your rulers. Now, it is very tempting when you do the kind of work I do, downloading government databases and uploading them, to try to sneak around and hope nobody notices. But that isn't the right way to do it. Justice Rana Day said that we petition our government to warn our rulers and to educate ourselves. And I think it's very important that you stand up and say what you're doing. Gandhi called it waiting upon the directors of the Raj. You know, before he went to make salt at Dandi, the first thing he did is he sent a letter to the Viceroy. Dear friend, a little bit cheeky, dear friend, we're going to make salt. And then it was only after that was rejected that he marched to the sea. And so, again, how do you confront authority? I think there's a lot to learn from the discipline. The big thing is a long-term focus. If you look at Aruna Roy and MKSS and the work they did for 25 years that led to the Right to Information Act, which is the most impressive Right to Information Act in the world. It is constitutionally based, and it made a huge difference. It took her 25 years to get that enacted. And the big lesson is you have to struggle. Now, you think about this, and I've been saying that universal access is like the great promise, and you would rightly say, well, you know, there's bigger problems in this world, right? There is climate change. Delhi is the most polluted city in the world this month. The President of the United States does not think climate change exists. We have great poverty and growing inequality. There's a food surplus in India and 200 million people starving. There are diseases that $1,000 pills could fix. And the reason that universal access to knowledge is so important is in a democracy like India, a democracy depends on an informed citizenry. We own our government. If government is not dealing with climate change, we need to educate ourselves that this is a real problem and tell our government they must deal with this issue. And that won't happen if it's just one person who thinks it's a problem. It's only when there's a mass uprising. We own our government. You are what makes democracy work. And we can change that. And I'd like to quote, as I begin to finish here, from John Adams. who was our first vice president. He was the president of the United States. He wrote something called the Dissertation on Canon and Feudal Law, which is quite a mouthful for a title. But I want you to listen to what he said, because he makes the case for why informed citizenry is the only thing that makes a democracy work. When we are not informed, all we get is corruption and greed. He said that ignorance and inconsideration are the two great causes of the ruin of mankind, that rulers have tried to wrest from the populace the knowledge of their rights and wrongs and the power to assert the former, or redress the latter. He said, in a democracy, liberty cannot be preserved without a general knowledge among the people who have a right to knowledge. He said, our rulers are no more than attorneys, agents, and trustees for the people. He said that the preservation of the means of knowledge amongst the lowest ranks is of more importance to the public than all the property of the rich men in the world. He said, if we wish to make our democracy work, we must let every sluice of knowledge be opened and set afloat. Martin Luther King said that change does not come rolling in on the wheels of inevitability. It comes only with continuous struggle. When he gave his speech against Vietnam, he said something that I have always remembered. He said, we must rapidly begin the shift from a thing-oriented society to a person-oriented society, when machines and computers, profit motives, and property rights are considered more important than people. The giant triplets of racism, extreme materialism, and militarism are incapable of being conquered. He said that in 1967, but I think that still resonates today. King said that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. I think justice for all must be our goal. We must let justice flow like the waters until righteousness flows like a mighty stream. That's a Martin Luther King line that he was quoting the prophet Amos. I believe that universal access to human knowledge must be our common aspiration. I believe that we should be saying Jai Gyan as well as Jai Hind. And so I thank you very much, and I'd be very happy to answer any questions. Thank you. There is a microphone, and because they are recording this, we'd appreciate it if you would use the microphone to ask any questions.
Any questions? Please introduce yourself.
Good evening. My name is Abhishek. I'm a computer science engineering student at Sayadri College of Engineering and Management. I have two questions for you. The first one being the objective behind uploading Gandhi's talks just as they are. While it's understandable that I can have a database for collection of law and cases like the Indian Cancun. So what was your motive behind that? Were you just exercising your right of having those documents up there, or what are your objectives behind that particular incident?
Okay. Well, so the question is basically why, so for government information, I think you accept that really ought to be available, but as we start getting into other things. So first of all, the works of Gandhi are no longer under copyright. I believe it is essential that our databases are rich, and so the heritage and the history of the fight for liberation, I think, is just as relevant as the opinions of the Supreme Court justices. I believe that non-commercial access to the works of Gandhiji is something that's important not only here in India, but to the 40 million non-resident Indians throughout the world. And so the objective was that we must go beyond simply this government database and that government database and begin to ask. One of the things that is important is that the collected works of Mahatma Gandhi was actually funded by the Indian government. It was your money that made those works available. So if it had been a private party that had done the work on their own, I think that's a different situation. But when it's the father of the country and it was funded by the government and it has great public interest, I believe it is okay to make that information available. Not only is it okay, it is essential that we do that.
My second question to you is a pretty simple one. It's the one I have a hard time wrapping my mind around. You kept talking that we bear the consequences, we got sued over there, we have 3 injunctions over there, you had problems over there. Why bear the consequences? What makes you tick and makes you go? Because as an engineering student, I'm just willing to get settled and get out the job and get paid and do my regular work. But what's that drive that makes you tick towards making information publicly accessible? So why bear the consequences?
Well, because I think the right to read the laws by which we as a people have chosen to govern ourselves is a human right. And I think when you see something that is important and must be done, and you have the capability to do something about it, right? If you don't, then yes, there's nothing you can do. But I did have that capability. I have worked with large government databases. I know how to negotiate with cabinet ministers. And I believe the idea that edicts of government must be available for everyone is a bedrock of the rule of law. And it's worth fighting for. And I'm willing to bear the consequences because I think it's an important principle.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Really appreciate your time. Thanks.